Hey guys, it's Taylor and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I'm so excited for today's wrap up because I feel like I had so many good books in the month of April, and as we all know, March was like my overall reading slump, content slump, life slump, I feel like, and April kind of revived me a little bit. And as we all know, like, April showers bring May flowers, and I'm just so excited for May and summer. And yeah, so obviously today's video is going to be my April wrap up. We're going to talk about all the books that I read in April. I had a little bit of a slower reading month just because it is finals time, and I feel like I was just really busy with schoolwork, and I also started a new position at my job, and so I kind of had some like life changes going on, but I honestly had a really good reading month overall. So let's just get into the books I read this month. The first two books I read in April literally were like my favorite books that I've read in the longest time. The feeling that these books gave me was like no other, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After. I read these I think April 1st through April 3rd or 4th, and I was literally obsessed with these two books. I cannot wait for the third one to come out. And I just want to start off by saying, like, I'm kind of in like a fantasy slump, and I haven't really been wanting to read much fantasy, and picking these up, it just like completely made me want to find like all the fantasy romances in the whole entire world. This book, like, they just feel like a fairy tale in like the best way possible, and it was just so much fun reading them, and they were honestly really action-packed where I felt like I couldn't put them down. It also just kind of like leaves off on a cliffhanger where I'm like, how am I supposed to wait till September for the next one to come out? As you can tell, I obviously gave these 5 stars. I'm obsessed with them. I also talked about in one of my videos, my vlogs this month, about how I thrifted these two books, which was like a huge thrift find for myself because look how gorgeous these covers are. And I also got the signed edition, and I bought both of these I think for like $16 or $18, which is like a steal in itself. Basically, these books follow this girl whose crush is about to get married to somebody kind of important in her life, and she's just like not okay with it, and she goes to the Jack of all hearts and she's like, can you help me like cancel this wedding or stop this wedding? And he's like, don't make deals with us because it's not going to turn out good for you. And she's like, I don't care. And so obviously she follows through with this deal, and obviously, like he said, he warned her, and then something bad happens, and you're kind of following her trying to reverse what she did, but then also kind of figure out this story and is it true. And yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail because I went in blind and I really enjoyed that, but I absolutely love these books, and it was a great way to start off April. Next, we have Promises and Pomegranates. This is a dark romance series. I don't know if the next books follow the same characters or if they're like standalones. I honestly don't know if I'll be picking up the next few books in the series. It wasn't my favorite. I've been really into dark romance the last few months. It started with like Haunting and Hunting Adeline, and then I'm reading Brutal Prince series by Sophie Lark, and I just really like the mafia romance, dark romance, so I thought I'd give this one a try. But I honestly just really didn't find myself connected to the story, and I felt like it was very insta-lovey. And so basically this girl has to get married to obviously some type of mob boss, or I don't know his title, and the family is obviously upset about it, but there's a reason. He's like blackmailing them, but she's like in love with him instantly, and like he kills her fiance, and it's just like really weird because I feel like in the other like dark romance or mafia books, usually the girl doesn't want to get married to this like the villain in the story, and it's not insta-lovey, but this one was like very insta-love for me. And I feel like in dark romance I don't want insta-love, like I want there to be some like enemies to lovers. So I don't know, it wasn't bad. I think I'm just comparing it to some really good dark romances that I've recently read, so it wasn't my favorite. I do think the cover is like literally absolutely stunning though, if that counts for anything. So next we have Ellen Hildebrand, 28 Summers. I've been dying to read her books, and I've been saving them for the summertime, so the minute that it felt a little bit nicer out, I picked this one off my TBR cart. And I have a few of hers. I just picked this one first, and this basically follows this lady who has this like meetup with a man over the span of 28 summers. They meet once a year. It's kind of giving like November 9th vibes where they only meet once a year. And I liked it at first, but it does have a trope in it that I really dislike. You know, I don't think it's a spoiler, so I'm just gonna say it. It has like the cheating trope essentially, because as they go throughout the years, the man that she meets up with ends up getting married, and even though he's in like an unhappy marriage and like they're like okay with it, I just don't love the whole cheating trope. I just don't understand why you just can't break up and then be together. I hate like the miscommunication, so it just wasn't for me. I really enjoyed her writing. I think the concept of the story was good. But yeah, it was just not, I'm not into the whole cheating trope. Next, we have two mafia romances that were just done right, and they are by Sophie Lark. I think, is this called the Brutal Birthright series? I've been saying that wrong this whole time. But I read the second and third book in this series, so Stolen Heir and Savage Lover. I'm slowly making my way through the whole entire series, and I am so obsessed. Like, these books I can read in one sitting. I think all three of the ones I've read so far, I've read in basically one sitting. They're just so fast paced, and like, it's just so good. And this is just dark romance done right. Next up, I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I feel like I'm so behind on this and Beach Read, so I feel like I need to read these quickly before I pick up her new release, Happy Place. And also, I'm doing a video where I'm trying to read all the books on my TBR cart, and I've had this on my TBR cart since last summer. So I picked this up finally and got to reading it. And it just really wasn't my favorite. I've heard a lot of people say this is not her best one. So I feel better about like not really loving it because I loved Book Lovers by her. So basically this just follows two main characters who would go on a vacation every single year together. And then there's like this miscommunication thing. But I feel like most of the time when it's like second chance romance, there's a reason why they stopped, like why they haven't talked in X many years. And the reason in this book is so stupid in my opinion. Like, it's literally the smallest thing. Like, it's just miscommunication, which is so annoying. I hate miscommunication. And I just wasn't really rooting for the characters. I didn't really care that much, but I did like the beachy vibes it was giving. So I didn't give this like a 3 stars, where it's kind of like hard to get through because I wasn't really interested. Then I read The Wife Who Knew Too Much, and you can tell this cover is just, I would never keep my books in this condition nowadays. I've literally had this book, I think, since like 2017, and I just have never read it, and I'm trying to read every single book I own. So this was kind of a book I forced myself to finally pick up, and I honestly didn't love it too much, but I also didn't hate it. Again, it's kind of like the cheating trope in a way, but I guess in thrillers, is that even like a trope? I don't know. But basically this guy gets another girl pregnant, and so then that girl is trying to get with him and like be with him, and she's like, leave your wife. And then coincidentally the wife ends up dead, and they're like, is it her? Is it the husband? Is it the girl's ex-boyfriend? I feel like it was very like predictable. Then I read Underneath the Sycamore Tree. And this one kind of let me down. I feel like I'm being really harsh in this video right now. And I don't mean that as like it was a bad book, but it just has so much hype surrounding it that I really expected it to be like a 5-star read. And it was kind of like a 4-ish, maybe 3.75. So basically this book just follows this girl who has a terminal illness, and her twin sister had the same illness and has died already. And so basically you're watching her grief, and then her mom basically can't live with her anymore because all she thinks about is her twin sister that's already like dead. But then also like the fact that this girl is also dying, so I feel like it's just too hard on the mom. So she goes and lives with her father, who kind of left them years ago, and the father has like a new wife and a step brother now. So she meets the step brother, and she likes the way that he's kind of like mean to her because he doesn't know she's terminally ill. But he also is grieving the loss of his dad, and his like mom lied to him about it. And I just feel like there was so much grief in this book, where it was kind of like trauma corn, if you know what I mean. Like, I think she was just trying to like, how many deaths and sadness can I put into this book to make it like the saddest? Whereas I feel like I wish they just followed like the one, just the sister. I feel like we didn't need to have the dad and the grandma grieving and like all that. I feel like it was too much. And yeah, it is also a stepbrother romance, and I didn't know that going into it. I don't really love step sibling romances either. It's Giving Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I don't know why I'm relating every book I'm reading to a Colleen Hoover book, but yeah, it wasn't the worst. I just feel like I didn't enjoy it that much. So, and I also read Anonymous Girl. I think I accidentally included this in my last monthly wrap up, but I definitely didn't read it in March. I was reading it and didn't finish it, and I feel like I included it on accident, but I did really like this. So if you already watched that one, this basically just follows a girl who is going into an anonymous, like, not a survey, but like a course to help out this psychologist. I don't know if she's a psychologist or psychiatrist. I literally read this like 30 days ago. And And it starts getting really personal, and she's like in this trial, and she's like, who else is in this trial? Like, is everyone else getting asked all these things? And like, do they have to devote so much of their like time and life to it? And so she starts getting kind of just like weary of this whole thing. And then she ends up meeting up with the doctor, and like, it's just very personal to her, and she's getting kind of weirded out. Like, how do you know all this? Why do you want to know all this? And then yeah, it's obviously a thriller, so there's more to it, but I don't want to spoil anything. So I gave this, I think, like a 4.25. The last physical book I read this month was Twisted Lies by Anna Huang. I finally finished the Twisted series. I started reading the Twisted series probably a year and a half ago, and I just kind of slowly have been making my way through it, and I really, really enjoyed this book so much. I think this might have been my favorite out of all of them, but it's hard because I read them so far apart from each other that I don't really remember the feeling I got from each one. But this one follows Christian, who is a like billionaire, and he's like head of a security company. Coincidentally, Stella has a stalker, and so Christian's like, I'm gonna help you out. And then she's like, why are you trying to be nice to me? You're not nice to anybody. And I don't want to say it's like an enemies to lovers because they're not really enemies, but it's very like grumpy sunshine-esque. And yeah. And then I read some books on my Kindle. I think I read 2 on my Kindle. I read The Housemaid's Secret, which was the second book by Frida McFadden to The Housemaid, and I absolutely loved this book. I don't want to say it was better than the first one because the first one was amazing. It's the first book I read from her, so I feel like it has a special place in my heart, but I definitely enjoyed how many twists were in this one, and I feel like Frida McFadden can do no wrong in my eyes. Like, every single book she writes, I will be reading. I read so many of her books. They're so good, and yeah. And the last book I read this month, also on my Kindle, was Full Tilt. This is another like sad book, and I definitely enjoyed this one a lot more than I enjoyed Underneath the Sycamore Tree. Full Tilt is basically following this girl who's like a rock star, and she's like very heavily involved in like alcohol and drugs, and like she's just not happy to be a part of this scene, but her parents kind of disowned her. So in order to make a living, she's with her very like popular band, but she's just not really happy. And her limo driver one night takes her home because she's like blacked out, and he has nowhere to bring her, and he's like a really good guy, but he obviously has some type of illness. I don't want to say disease, but there's something wrong with him, and he lives like a very tight schedule life, and she doesn't understand why, because she lives like the complete opposite, and they end up becoming friends, and she's like, I'm really interested in your life, like I want to be like you, and he's like, you can't. And he doesn't want to tell her that he's like basically dying, because they start to develop kind of a relationship. And yeah, it's very sad, but it's also a really good like happy, not happy ending, but I feel like the girl really evolves a lot throughout the story. And yeah, so that is all the books that I read in the month of April. I feel like so many of them were good, and I'm finally just getting through my TBR cart that I have books that I've literally had on there for like a year or 2, 3 years, and that just like feels kind of good. But I do have some FOMO because there's so many books right now that are being talked about that I want to read so bad, but I promised myself I will read all those books before I buy any new ones. So like Happy Place by Emily Henry and the new Abby Jimenez book. There's just so many books I want to be reading, but it's fine. We have time to read them all, right? Yeah, that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. All my links will be down in the description box if you want to catch up with me on TikTok, my Bookstagram, etc. And I'll see you guys in my next one.